Well, it is that time of year again. The Eagles end the season again with another disappointing loss to Tampa Bay Buccaneers this time in the wild card round. Final score 32-9. Before I, clicked record for this video, I rewatched my video from last year that I made when the Eagles lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And I kind of thought to myself, this is what I thought after that loss, what we needed to do. And, what are my thoughts now? And one really interesting thing I noticed about that game was we lost for like completely opposite reasons. You would think, and well, I wouldn't say completely opposite. We kind of sucked the whole way through. I'll get into the game itself, but I felt like, last year the defense was the disappointment for the Eagles, but this year I felt like it was the offense in this game. Of course, defense letting up 32 points is not a good stat, but there were 3 possessions in a row that the Buccaneers had that the defense was able to stop them, made some crucial plays, some clutch plays, getting them out of field goal range multiple times and some insane sacks. Shout out to Milton Williams and Brandon Graham for doing their part, being great on defense tonight. Fletcher Cox, too. I think he might have gotten a sack. I'm not really sure, but, I know Milton Williams had a really nice game. And, they did their job. There were 3 possessions in a row where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers got 0 points. And at that point in the game, we were only down by 7. It was a touchdown. We just needed a touchdown to tie the game. And we couldn't do it. All 3 of those drives, we got nothing. After that, I kind of figured, yeah, it's over. I'll be blunt. I've figured this season's been over probably since we lost to the Cardinals in week 17. The team just has looked terrible ever since their loss to the 49ers. And I kind of want to go in more into that. Because I said last year it was a very important offseason for the Eagles. We were losing a lot of key players on defense, like Javon Hargrave, that guy from the Bears that we got. I forget his name, but we lost him. Linval Joseph, Ndamukong Suh. We lost a lot of depth on the defensive line, and I think the hope for the Eagles this season on the defense, for the younger guys, the Jordan Davises, the Jalen Carter, who we drafted this past draft, I think the hope was for them to, play really well. And I wouldn't say they played badly, but obviously we lacked the veteran impact on defense. And it just was a mess. Our defensive line was not nearly as good as it was last season. And I think that's the first thing you got to take into account when talking about the Philadelphia Eagles defense this year. Talk about the secondary, right? It took a huge step back this year. Darius Slay and James Bradbury and C.J. Gardner-Johnson last year were killers. I mean, they were, pretty good every game. Consistently too. And in the offseason, unfortunately, we didn't pay C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He ends up going to Detroit, and they're in the divisional round. They're going to be playing Tampa, and I'm thinking they're probably going to win that game, but we'll see. But we let C.J. go. We re-signed Bradbury. Slay was still under contract, and Slay, he had a down year in production. Definitely, I feel like age was kind of catching up to him. And then James Bradbury just sucked this season. He was terrible the whole way through, man. I mean, it was an embarrassment for James Bradbury this season. I don't want to see him on the team next year. He's got to go. I don't know if you can really afford to get rid of him, but he was garbage this season. And then other guys on the defense, the secondary just weren't really that great. Avonte Maddox, he was out the whole year, basically returned at the end of the season. He looked terrible against the Giants. And then for whatever reason, we started him against the Buccaneers. And I'll get into the Buccaneers game in a little bit, but just to touch on that for a second. I think it is an embarrassment that we started Avonte Maddox over Reed Blankenship in this game. Reed Blankenship was inactive, and I'm not saying Reed Blankenship was going to win us this football game, but I think it would have helped a little bit with tackling. I think Reed definitely is one of the better tacklers on, the defense, especially in the secondary. And I think that was a huge mistake, making him an inactive for this game and making Avonte Maddox play. And I doubt we're going to re-sign him. I don't think we should. I think we've seen enough of Avonte here. But that's just talking about the defense. Clearly, we didn't do enough this offseason to bolster it. And I'm sure Howie understands that. And time again, he has underestimated the value of the linebacker position. I think he kind of just expected Nakobe Dean would, come in clutch for the team and, take the next step this year. And although he looked solid at times, he was injured multiple times throughout the season. I think he didn't even play in this Buccaneers game. I think he was injured. And we had Zach Cunningham and Nicholas Morrow at the linebacker position. They just have not been good this year. Cunningham had a few chances to get some interceptions this game, but I'm not surprised he didn't get them. I mean, there's so much I want to say. I'm probably going to forget to say a lot, but I really just want to get into this game. But I want to talk about the offense. Last year the offense was the strong suit for this team, and one thing that I really underestimated going into that offseason was the importance of Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator. And this happened with the Eagles before. When the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2017, obviously the Indianapolis Colts hired our offensive coordinator Frank Reich as their next head coach. And he had some pretty good seasons there, I think. I think he did a solid job in Indy while he was there. But the point is, after he left, we didn't bring in a good enough replacement. And that same thing has happened. We hired from within the organization, which is, I believe, what we did after Reich left as well. And we hired Brian Johnson, who was the quarterback's coach. I wasn't the biggest fan of the move at the time because it's he doesn't have any experience. This is a really important time for this team. I would have liked us to bring in a more experienced guy, but I get the point. I get, the team trusting Brian Johnson, but he was not good this year. I mean, people all, say the Eagles collapsed, but this was a disaster waiting to happen the whole season. I mean, as someone who watched every Eagles game this season, start to finish mostly, there were a few games I didn't really watch a lot of, like the Rams-Eagles game, didn't really watch that one. But for this whole season, it was clear that the play calling was just not there. And I'll get into the play calling a little more when we talk about the game, but I'm just, putting that out there. The play calling this season has been terrible. The running game, we brought in DeAndre Swift during the offseason and some other running backs. Swift had a pretty solid year for the Eagles, but we kind of just stopped using him in the running game. We kind of abandoned the running game near the end of the year, and I feel like that was a big mistake. I feel like we should have ran the ball more in this game than we did, especially with Jalen Hurts having the hand injury. And don't worry, we'll talk about Jalen Hurts. But the running game just wasn't as good this year. And Jalen Hurts, quite frankly, wasn't as good this year. And it's hard to say why. You could say play calling was bad. You could say he's dealing with injury, or you could say he's just regressed. But there are some things about Jalen Hurts' game that I did not like throughout this whole season. It was clear to me that he just can't effectively read an NFL defense. Whenever he kind of backs up in the pocket, he'll look at one or two guys, or one side of the field, or he'll quickly look around, but he's just not fast enough. He's just not fast enough, and he needs to be faster. Can't get the ball out fast enough, and he got sacked a lot during the season because of that, and especially in this game, he got sacked a lot, threw the ball away. It was just terrible. But yeah, and that's not all with Hurts. He had a lot of interceptions this year, some really ugly ones too. Like the one at the end of the Jets game earlier in the year was awful. But again, I don't want to keep dwelling on everything during the season. I want to talk about this game because that's what this is, review the game. But I just kind of want to give some background. So now we're going to get into the game. And going in, I was not expecting the Eagles to do much of anything. We looked terrible to end the season. The Buccaneers, they didn't end their season particularly well either, but I knew they had the firepower on offense to give our defense trouble, and that's exactly what they did. They ended up winning this one 32-9. And I know I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the defense gave the Eagles a chance to win this game. Near the end of the second quarter, the Eagles got a big touchdown to Devontae Smith and, put the game within a touchdown. We almost got the 2-point conversion, but the Buccaneers were able to stop it. I think they're the only team this season who was able to stop the brotherly shove without, there being a penalty involved. So kudos to them. They did a good job there. But at that point in the game, right, the Eagles had a chance. They really did. And, the Eagles make a stop on defense, prevent the Buccaneers from scoring any points. And at that point, it's kind of just like, okay, we have a chance to go down the field and tie it. And it was near the end of the first half. The Eagles, unfortunately, weren't able to do anything. They only had one timeout. So we go into halftime, down 7. And at that point, it's like, okay, well, you get the ball at the start of the second half. So maybe you can, run the ball, establish a running game, and dominate time of possession. That was kind of the key to success there for the Eagles, but they just were not able to execute that in the second half. I don't even know how many running plays they tried in the second half, but it was not nearly enough. It was a complete letdown by the Eagles in the second half. The defense, I'll say it again, the Eagles, they go out there at the, start of the second half, don't really do anything, punt the ball. Buccaneers get pretty good field position, but the defense is able to make another crucial stop. And at that point, you're like, okay, the defense is doing their job. Eagles offense, let's roll in. And then it's just terrible play call after terrible play call with the Eagles offense, man. Just this whole season, you got these screen passes. You're just passing way too much. Jalen Hurts, I believe he threw 30-something passes this game. Let me just look at the box score. He threw 35 passes. And although, the stats are deceiving, I just want to let you guys know. He was 25 of 35 for 250 yards, right? Which you're going to think, oh, wow, that's not that bad. I mean, he did pretty good, right? That's what you're going to think. But the stats are deceiving. That's all I'm going to say. The Eagles offense just could not muster a single thing in that second half. I don't even know if they got a point. I don't think they did. It was just miserable. They couldn't do anything when it mattered, and then eventually the Buccaneers pulled away at the end of the third quarter and got another touchdown in the fourth quarter. So the Buccaneers, they did their job. They did what they needed to do to win the game, and the Eagles didn't. And that's just how this game went, unfortunately. And it was kind of just a slow burn. It really has been for this whole season, because the worries were there the whole year, right? With the play calling. A change needed to be made early in the season, but the Eagles didn't do it. And they stuck to it the whole season. They made a change on defense, which I'll get into that, but they stuck with this offense the play calling and whatever, and it just didn't work. And near the end of the season, it really showed. A lot of the players were just checked out, and it was a disaster for the Philadelphia Eagles. Um, but yeah, Jalen Hurts in this game, again, I think the stats are a little bit deceiving. He didn't turn over the ball, but he just was not great. And I don't know why you're having Jalen Hurts throw the ball 35 times with an injured throwing hand. I think that was ridiculous. And I knew the Eagles shouldn't be throwing it. I said to myself before the game, if they make Hurts throw more than 20 times, we're probably going to lose this game. And he threw 20 times by halftime. I mean, it was bad for the Eagles. And I don't think Hurts necessarily was bad throwing the ball, but like he like it just I don't know how to describe it. He just was not effectively capitalizing on what the Buccaneers defense was giving him. Like there were multiple plays where like guys were open, but he just threw to a guy that wasn't open. Guy that had tight coverage. I mean, I don't really want to spend too much time on Hurts himself because um I think, of course, he's far from the only reason we lost this game, but I gotta wonder if it was really the best move signing Jalen Hurts to that contract extension that he got, because I'm not sure, man. I'm really not. Like, they did the same thing with Carson Wentz, his third year. They signed him to the contract mid-season, basically. And at the time, everyone was celebrating because, he was coming off of that year where he was looking really good, almost was an MVP. And it's genuinely eerily similar to that. And he just slowly just sucked. And then by the end of it, we just let him go. And then I'm not saying it's the same with Hurts. This is one year where he just wasn't really that great, but he just overall this season was not good. And again, it's hard to say why. There's a variety of reasons, but I definitely think there needs to be some changes made to the coaching staff, and I'll get into that more at the end of the video. But I think maybe the Eagles might have paid Hurts a little too much money a little too early. And that's kind of my thoughts on that. The play calling again was just terrible this game. The first drive the Eagles had, it was 3rd and 2, and again, you only need 2 yards. We had, I think, run the ball both of the plays beforehand, and I was like, wow, okay, so maybe we can, get some good points here. Like maybe we could just run the ball, right? Whatever, but we didn't. we do a deep ball to Dallas Goedert, and it's incomplete. Pass is broken up, and I thought that was stupid. Like, why would you do that? Why? What is the genuine point of throwing a deep ball on a 3rd and 2? And when that play happened, I kind of figured this is how the game was gonna go. Eagles just over the course of this game made a lot of bad play calls that ultimately contributed to the losing game that they had and the result of this season. And it's hard to say what you do at this point as far as the coaching staff goes. I think the coordinators on the defense and offense both need to go for sure, right? Brian Johnson, I did not like what I see from him this year. I don't know how heavily involved in play calling he was, but whatever the case is, I think he needs to go. I don't care if he's Jalen Hurts' boy, right? I know they're tight, but he was not ready to take on the offensive coordinator role. Downgrade him to quarterback coach if you want. I don't care. Just do not have him near play calling again, because this was terrible. I don't know if Sirianni was the one doing the play calling. Again, it's hard to tell, but If he was, I think that's even worse than if Brian Johnson was the one doing it, because that's your head coach. That's the guy who represents your organization. And I'll get into Nick Sirianni a little more because there's a lot of questions about his future with the team. Um, for the off season, but again, I'll get into that. But I'm just kind of at a loss for words, because this was this. I wouldn't say it was really like an outstanding year. Like we didn't start off the best. Like again, I know we went 10-1, but there was a lot of flukes in that. I just want to put that out there. It was a lot of fluky stuff. A lot of luck was involved with that. And, there was definitely cracks, and the 49ers exposed us, man. They really did. And we just couldn't recover from it. We couldn't adapt. And another thing I wanted to bring up, I was kind of just improvising there, but another thing I want to talk about is the practicing on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, you can tell they do not practice hard enough. I remember a few weeks ago, Hargrave, our former one of our former defensive tackles who left last offseason, he's with the 49ers now. He brought up in an interview that the Eagles practices were not really as intense as the 49ers practices. And you could take that whatever way you want. But to me, that tells you that they're just not practicing well enough. And it shows on the defensive side of the ball for sure. Miscommunications everywhere. The tackling is terrible. I mean, we couldn't tackle guys at all. I mean, you'd have dudes one-on-one, easy tackle, right? And they just couldn't do it. I mean, it was ugly. And I want to give props to the Buccaneers, though. They did have a really good game, but I'm just saying the Eagles should not have lost this game the way they did. And that's the thing. We have the talent on this team to go to Super Bowls, I think. But it's just that the coaching has just been terrible this year, and it showed. And it sucks because after all this stuff I was seeing from Jason Kelce this game, our longtime center, it looks like he's more likely than not going to retire, which is it's disappointing. Like, he had a great career with the Eagles, won a Super Bowl, made a lot of Pro Bowls, first All-Team Pro, or the All-Pro first team, whatever. I don't know. He made that a lot, made a lot of Pro Bowls, won a Super Bowl. He's going to be a Hall of Famer and an Eagles legend forever, right? But it just sucks to see him go out the way that he did, and we might be seeing Brandon Graham retire too. He's another longtime Eagle. I think he is actually the longest tenured Eagle on the team. And it's looking like he might be calling it quits. There's even a chance Fletcher Cox hangs it up after this year. I'm not as confident that he will, but I think there's definitely a chance that he does, which sucks. It is suck. It's just so bad that these longtime vets and legends on this team are gonna go out this way. And I think it's terrible. I really do. And I know people love the clown on the Eagles, but it's just sad to see, I think. So, anyways, congrats to the Buccaneers. They're going to be playing the Lions next week. Should be an exciting game. I do got Detroit winning that one personally. I think the Lions might go on a little bit of a run this year, but we'll see. As for the Eagles, they got a lot of work to do this offseason. It's kind of hard to say what needs to happen for sure. I think for sure, though, they need to get new coordinators. They need to bring in more experienced guys. I don't think Brian Johnson was the answer. And as I touched on earlier, we replaced Sean Desai, who was our defensive coordinator, late in the season with Matt Patricia, which I knew was a recipe for disaster. Like, yeah, a lot of Eagles fans were saying, oh, well, it can't get worse than Sean Desai, because, he obviously wasn't doing that well either. but it got a lot worse. And that's why you don't make that sort of change late in the season. It's one thing if you do that early in the season when there's still a lot of games left to be played, chances for you to get it together. But the Eagles didn't do that. They waited until one of the fourth to last game of the season to make that change. And it showed. I mean, the defense was a mess from there on out. And overall, it was just embarrassing to watch. So, like, I think Desai and Patricia should be done. Like, it was terrible. So the coordinators, they need to go. We need to clean house there for sure. Get new guys in there. As far as Nick Sirianni goes, I personally don't have a preference on what happens to him. Again, I like Nick Sirianni. I like his energy, although I know he's a pretty controversial and hated figure by most opposing fans. But I like his energy. I like his swagger. I like him as a person, but as a coach, to me, it just seems like he didn't do a good enough job at getting this team prepared for games this season. Again, the defense and the practicing, I just don't think it was that physical, and it really showed this season. And I don't really know if he lost the locker room, but I kind of feel like he did. Again, we're never really gonna know until people come out and say some stuff. But near the end of that season, it was just bad. And like, again, I feel like it might be an irrational decision to fire Nick Sirianni after this season. He just took the team to the Super Bowl, but I wouldn't put it past Howie Roseman to make a move like that, especially with the coaching candidates that are available out there right now. You have Bill Belichick out there, who is the greatest coach in NFL history. Jim Harbaugh is a coaching candidate out there. I kind of feel like he's a little overblown and overrated, but he's a proven, experienced NFL coach who has been to a Super Bowl before. He just won the national championship with Michigan. He would be an upgrade, I feel like, over Sirianni. He would definitely have more physical practices, that's for sure. Even Mike Vrabel being out there, like, I don't know if he would be better than Sirianni or much of an improvement, really, but I wouldn't mind them getting him. Pete Carroll's out there. I don't think he would come here, but I think that's definitely somewhere they could look to. So with all those guys out there that are options, and even Mike Tomlin, we're yet to see what's going to happen with him in Pittsburgh, but there's a chance it's looking like he's going to be a free agent as well. So there's a lot of good coaching candidates out there. I don't know if the Eagles are really going to wait another year, right? I really have no preference. I just want what's best for the team, and I'm unsure right now of whether or not firing Sirianni is the best decision for the team. I think it would be really irrational if they did that. But at the same time, I get it, kind of, maybe. I don't know. It's a lot to think about for the Eagles for sure. As far as players go, I already said I'm done with Bradbury and Maddox. I think they both need to go. I think the defensive side of the ball needs to be overhauled for sure. We need to go out there and get some good linebackers. Howie Roseman has undervalued the linebacker position for years. But if you look at all these good teams right now that are still in the playoffs, all of them have some pretty damn good linebackers. 49ers have Fred Warner, right? The Buccaneers have Levante David. I think that's his name. I don't know. There's probably other guys that I'm just not thinking about. I can't, Kyle Hamilton, I think, is a linebacker with the Ravens, right? I mean, these teams have elite linebackers, and I think you need an elite linebacker on this team. I don't know if that's a guy that you would get in the draft or you would get free agency. I think it really depends on who's out there right now. I think we definitely need to get some good linebackers. The defensive line, I think, needs an overhaul as well. We're likely going to be losing Brandon Graham. We might be losing Fletcher Cox. We need to get some vets some veteran free agents uh, on the defensive line to come to Philly because again, I think we were just way too young at the defensive line. I think we were really hoping Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter would be those guys for us this year. And although they both showed promise at times, especially Jalen Carter, they didn't really do much near the end of the season. Milton Williams, again, he had a great game against Tampa, but that's one guy, right? I think we definitely need a lot of depth there at the rotation. I think offensive line could be an issue as well going into next year. If Jason Kelce retires, for sure. I mean, I think that completely takes away the tush push, which is one of the main things we're known for. Without him at the helm, I don't see how we're going to succeed in doing that as much as we do. So I think offensive line, we need some more depth there as well. As far as like skill positions go on the offense, I like who we got. I would get rid of Quez Watkins at this point. I wasn't a fan of how he played last year down the stretch, but he just did absolutely nothing this season. He kind of felt like an empty spot on the roster. So I think you really just get rid of him. I like Zacchaeus as a third option more, even Julio Jones if he comes back, though I'm not sure. But yeah, that's really it for the skill position, wide receivers there. Running back, I like DeAndre Swift. Kenneth Gainwell, he didn't have as good of a year as I was hoping he would, but he's still a solid second option running back. So I think we're fine there for now. Again, we got a lot of retooling to do this offseason. Howie's going to have his work cut out for him, I think. It's not gonna be an easy fix. I just really hope this doesn't end up the same way the Carson Wentz era did here, because that was just really sad. It was a really sad time to be an Eagles fan. Although we were making the playoffs every year until his last year here, but uh, it towards the end of that, it was just ugly. I don't know. So we'll see what happens next year. But very disappointing way to end the season. And yeah, that's all I gotta say.